I missed it.
Oh.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone. Cameron here from the D&D Coalition, and welcome to the Fable 42 Network, where we build community through friendship, gaming, and chaos. You are watching GaryCon 2020 DM's Corner panel, Pre-TPK edition. So for those of you who don't know, a TPK stands for Total Party Kill, essentially meaning game over, everybody's dead. We're calling it that for two reasons. Number one, immediately following this segment, we are doing a D&D meat grinder battle royale type one-shot DM'd by the devious Jason Russel, who will introduce himself here in just a minute. But more so, this discussion is designed to help you avoid this situation. Now, we're not necessarily going to be talking about the technicalities or mechanics for avoiding the TPK at the table, because let's be honest, actions do happen. But rather the psychological aspect behind it and how to keep a satisfied, healthy group of adventurers, or dare I say friends, although sometimes they might not think that of a dungeon master. So we're going to be talking about internal questions a DM might face that are not exactly answers to in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the cascade of emotions you're going to inevitably feel, internal frustrations that you might face as a DM, the bonds created and sometimes destroyed during a campaign, with your players, of course, but also keeping motivation high for you, the Dungeon Master, and also your players. But first, I wanted to shout out Luke Gygax and the team there at GaryCon. My heart goes out to you all. I'm very grateful for this opportunity presented all of us and adapting and doing what you got to do to make all of us nerds happy. But also our very own Chris Solo for making accommodation hosting this Twitch channel here on the Fable 42 Twitch network. But without further ado, I want to introduce to you the men and women who sit behind scary screens and make funny voices. Please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Am I first?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you are.
Okay. I'm Chris Solo. I help manage and create the realms of Ukador and the origins of Ukador, and we collectively here as a community, we all have created the Fabled 42 Network, which is a collection of gamers and streamers and artists and other content creators where we all can grow and build this community together instead of everyone trying to do it themselves. That's kind of our motto, and it's very chaotic. We have a series of streams all weekend, so pretty much 12 hours for the next today, tomorrow. What day is it today? Today's Friday? I forgot what day it is. It's a blur. So all day, the rest of the day today, we'll follow with Jason Russell's meat grinder. Then we have two 12-hour days tomorrow and Sunday, and then finishing up GaryCon with the origins of Ukador on Monday. That's me.
Cool. Hey, I'm Jason from Critical Dice, and I run the Instagram account Critical Dice, where I do game hooks, and there's a big community there of people who just love making stuff for D&D, and I also sell dice and shirts and other kind of cool things, and I have been playing D&D since I was in middle school, which was a long time ago. I've learned to teach my kids and other people, bringing them into the community, and I'm just a big nerd, I guess. I don't know what else to say.
Big nerd, Jason. Well done. I'm Matt Rauscher. I do the Pickle Dragon Instagram page, website. I write adventures mostly, but always looking to collaborate with people like the great Kelsey Dionne. But I've been playing D&D now since, I guess it's the very early 80s, though I did get to tag along with my brother and his group in the late 70s. So been around it virtually my entire life, and yeah, that's me. Just to love the game.
Well, hello then. I'm Kelsey, and I am an adventure writer and a content creator for Dungeons and Dragons. I've worked with Matt. We've written a book together, and I've been playing D&D for a while. I actually started the year that AD&D transitioned into 3rd edition, so just when I got my mind wrapped around THAC0, it went away, and had to relearn it, but I've been playing since then and love it.
Oh, that's great. So I think the newest DM at this table because I only started playing D&D in late 2018. But hi, I'm Lily Sparks. I'm living a Bard Knock life that you can follow on Instagram and Twitter. I play in many streams. I run other games. I'm also running a bunch of coronavirus relief games. So if you are on the front lines, if you're working, if you're in a bad mental health place, if you need some laughs and sparks in your life, all of my DMs are open. Please hit me up. I'm trying to run as much as possible just to get some cheer out in the world. So yeah, follow me in places. There's links on my things.
Hello, I'm Kelsey, also known as Lady Tiefling, LT, Lady Tief, whatever you want to call me. I make random loot tables on my Instagram and Twitter. Basically, when you have murder hobo players and they're killing a bunch of stuff and you need to find some quick loot that isn't a bunch of coins, I'm here to help out with that. So if you check out my Instagram, I have a whole bunch of these tables for whenever you need a quick idea. Hopefully I'm there to help out.
Awesome. Well, hey, it's Ray with GotDM. I've been playing this game for about 26 years on my Instagram channel and GotDM. All I do is kind of make things out of random objects. So more on the crafting side than the DMing side, but it's one of the things that I do and I love both sides of it. And just one thing, I just wanted to say thank you for having me here. Love the community and love everything that the Coalition does.
Hi, my name's Keith. I run the Fire and Dice page on Instagram. You can also find me on Twitter and YouTube. I just post a lot of Dungeons & Dragons information, and I also have the Friday night fights that I run basically throughout the entire year where you can vote and win. It's just a big, fun event that I try and do all year round.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. This is kind of a surreal moment, hang out and talking with all of you guys who not that long ago we're all strangers, but now very close friends. So thank you for being here. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to set the score clear right now. Wait, can you hear me? Is my mic good, Chris? Everybody? A little quiet before. We're good? Okay. So we are going to set the score straight, and we're going to say that the number one way to avoid a total party kill and avoid a lot of other situations in life is through communication. I think we can all agree on that. But essentially, this enables us to avoid a pent-up animosity, frustration. Any sort of miscommunication can be fixed through communication. So it is very important to keep that in mind. You're going to have disagreements with people whenever you have more than two self-thinking, opinionated people in the room. So Keith and Matt, we had a conversation a long time ago about like problem players, things along those lines. And Matt, you have a very comedic way of dealing with these. You shared a story about how you had a guy that was so upset that you literally had to kick him out of the table and just was completely inappropriate. So Matt and Keith, worst comes to worst. When do you know it's time to have a problem player step away from a campaign? So how do you cut off the bad?
Well, I think when emotions run high, I think it's pretty clear when it's role playing versus somebody who is actually getting heated and is about to come across the table at you, which is what with that particular player, which is what I was told that was about to happen by someone who sitting next to them. He had a mechanical pencil and he had snapped it underneath the table, but at that point it was just, all right, let's just take a 10-minute break, and he went outside and cooled off for a while, but he at that point I had the advantage of having a lot of communication. It was most of my campaigns we have some sort of message board, and there's a lot of communication between the players about the game and what's going on, and so as the players were talking to him and calling him up and you know, and he insisted, oh, I feel like I'm getting picked on, you know, it's but you know, I've always been a strong believer in you know, that if there, you know, there are consequences to all actions, you know, and he had always been used to a game where it was kind of like Star Trek versus Babylon 5. You know, every episode of Star Trek, the old Star Trek was encapsulated. There, that had nothing to do with the previous one. You know, whereas Babylon 5 was this ongoing story. You know, and he had always played the Star Trek style of game where, you know, everything was a one shot and it didn't matter what happened last week. And so, you know, at that point, you know, if he wasn't going to adapt to a story that we as a group had developed together, you know, it was just time to part ways. And I think he had actually decided that for himself. His character had died, and he just said, you know, this just isn't for me, you know.
Yeah. So,
and but it was he did get pretty tense, and ironically the session where his character died, it was almost cathartic for him because he had a way out, you know.
Right.
The session he got really mad at me was the session where one of his little henchmen had died.
Yeah.
And, so I mean,
so it's kind of an amicable parting of ways, which is obviously the best thing you can wish for.
And it's you're never going to please everybody, you know. Not every game is right for every player, not every player is right for every game, you know. It's just, it is what it is. And you know, and it sucks that it has to be that way, but it sometimes is.
Yeah. Keith, I know you usually run pretty big tables too. What do you do whenever things get heated like that, or if someone's acting inappropriately, or, you know, if there's ever an uncomfortable situation at the table?
Well, fortunately, I've never actually had to have someone leave the table, which is a good thing. I have had a couple issues of late. One of them, I can honestly say, was my brother. He has a temper. He can get very emotional into the game. So that was wearing on some other players, and they would come to me. So I did end up having to have that difficult conversation. So it comes back to what you said right off the bat, communication. I actually had a conversation with him, explained to him what was going on, tried to not make it feel like we were ganging up on him. That's why I did it alone. He understood, and actually things got immediately better and everybody noticed.
Yeah.
You know, so it did work out in that situation. Had some other situations here and there, nothing too major. That was probably the biggest one I had, and the hardest one because it was my brother. But yeah, again, communication, just sitting down and talking with that person. And like kind of Matt hinted, not ganging up and attacking one person, but just, you know, one-on-one.
Because nobody wants to be backed into a corner. Now,
exactly.
Kelsey, Lady T, you are arguably one of the most kind-hearted people on the internet. How would you, or, you know, for any very non-confrontational DM or person out there, how would you ask a player to step away if it's something that clearly needs to happen?
So I have a little bit difficulty answering this question because I don't think I've ever asked a player to step away. In problematic games that I've been in, I've canceled myself as a DM and taken that, said, you know, I'm the DM, I'm not enjoying this. We're all still friends, but this isn't the type of game I want to be running. And then I normally step back. But I have had where players have gotten frustrated with a game. And when that kind of situation happens, it's normally afterwards that I talk to them one-on-one. But I've never had anything that's been too drastic to have to ask someone to leave. And normally if it's ever gotten too bad, there's been 2 instances where I just stopped DMing for that group. So
yeah, and I definitely think that that's a peaceful way of doing it, because you're not really pointing the finger at anybody. You're just saying, hey, this isn't working. Do any of the rest of you have any feedback for that, or anything to put onto that?
Yeah, with the idea of communication, one of the things that I've always tried to do before all of games, even with people who are brand new, especially, but even people who have been playing for decades and decades and decades, I try to start all of my games with a kind of a little speech that is, the goal of this game is to have fun.
Yeah.
And we each have our own responsibilities to make sure that that it's fun for people on your side of the screen as well as my side of the screen. Because on my side, I have an infinite world to create. And on your side, you have the burden of infinite choice. And I'm going to ask you guys to make choices that help everyone to have fun. And remember, I'm not the bad guy. I just run them. And so together, we're the ones that can make this fun for everybody. And that typically has fixed or hopefully preempted a lot of stuff that could potentially come back, especially if people are new to the game and they're not familiar with a game where there isn't a way to win, right? Because with D&D, the way you win is by having fun. And the way you super win is when everyone has fun, right? I try to also keep in constant contact with my players, especially if I see one that seems out of their depth or they're especially quiet during a game, and I'll check back in with them, during a break or, via text later in the week and just see if they're doing good, if what was going on. And for the most part, it's been really positive. They just had, stuff from work, or they were surprised by the way things were going and they just don't think fast on their feet. And so they're trying to figure out what their character would do in that moment. Or I was trying to think, it was another thing, but yeah. And like, even when the ongoing campaign that I have going on right now, we, at the end of this past year, we kind of took a break for the holidays, and it was kind of the end of a big arc. And before we started the new arc in the new year, and the open question that I gave all my players was, is there anything that you're not getting from the game? And I don't want any of you to answer now. I want you guys to text me later and let me know if anything's lacking. And that seemed to work out really well.
Cam, I have one thing to say.
Communication, ladies and gentlemen, communication.
So from the other side of the spectrum, so some of you who have been watching the Realms of Ugador for the past 2 years, I've never DM'd before this. All my DM knowledge is watching Mercer DM or watching other awesome streamers DM, and then kind of made my own thing. But there's a lot of DM mistakes that go out there, and it is based on communication. So I've fucked up once a while ago where the communication had broken at some point between myself and my players. I've always been like the person who checks in with my players after each game, and it just, that transparency wasn't quite there. Maybe I was coming off too intimidating, or my players didn't feel like they could say anything. So they felt railroaded at one point and then held on to that for like 15 sessions. And because of that, it created this toxic atmosphere between myself and the players, where people were going because it was obligation, because we have a live stream, that this is a narrative show that we have to go to every Wednesday. And they started to lose fun, and I missed that because I'm doing other streams and I'm still working 80 hours, so I'm exhausted. I'm just focused, tunnel vision, complete tunnel vision. We got to a point where they went to fight this giant megachromatic dragon, Grasso, and they felt like they were railroaded to get in this situation. They felt like they were in a no-win situation. None of them wanted to fight this ancient black dragon, which if you watch any of my shows, it's crazy. And they felt like they had to fight this thing, and that wasn't the case. There was probably about 10 different clues that they just didn't pick up on, because if you're not having fun, you're not focused, you're not paying attention to those cues. So I completely missed it. So at the end of that episode, we had a big explosion. Like, I was completely floored. Like, why is everybody angry? We had players that were yelling, and there was just a lot of toxic things, and I was like, holy fuck, like, what the hell just happened? So communication goes both ways, me as a DM or us as DMs and players. And if the longer that you wait with not communicating with your players or your DM, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. You have to be upfront, you have to be honest, otherwise it just festers, and then potentially could have ruined the entire the friendships, the stream, everything. It could have gotten to a point, because had it not happened then, people probably would just quit, and then it would get to a really bad point. Luckily, we were able to address some of the situations. We made some personnel changes and other things, and everything got back to it, and now we're better than ever. Everybody's happy, and we all have that open line of communication.
So you said something that kind of sparked my next question. It's a lot of it is the DM's responsibility, right? Because we're driving the car. We're the one that's kind of in charge and directing everybody else. So one really easy way to kind of set the score straight, you know, Jason, you said that you got a speech that you give all of your.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
I thought it was just me.
No.
It's just Cam.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Turn
no.
off the microwave, Cam.
All right, Jason, give us your speech.
Yeah.
Well, that basically was it. It was like the goal today is to have
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah.
And the way we do that is by having fun together. And then I talk about my responsibility on my side of having infinite world to create, and their responsibility and burden of infinite choice. Because if you think about it, that really is it. They can choose anything. They could slay the dragon. They could bake him a cake. You don't know what's going to happen, but please use that responsibly so that everyone's enjoying yourselves. And that kind of came about because there was a time where I was running a one shot for an Avengers League or something, and had all new people, brand new people, and one guy who's played a bunch. And he was railroading them as a player because he was just like rushing off to check out this room and check out this room and check out this room, because they didn't know what to do yet. And they were still kind of feeling it out. So he was just preemptively making choices for them by saying, oh, that's what my character would do. He's a barbarian. And I'm like, yes, but let's talk about that a second. So it kind of helped me to do that and to remind people, especially when I teach younger kids, elementary age and middle school and high school age kids, it seemed to work out really well. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in, and then Ray, totally, like, really quick. Anyone who's been following me for a while knows that I'm recovering from borderline personality disorder, where the main cure for it is learning how to communicate effectively and regulate your emotions, because there's a lot of not knowing how to do that, which causes the thing. So I read an amazing book, which is really, 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 really good for any kind of communication in life. It's called Nonviolent Communication. It was recommended to me by Satine Phoenix, and it's just a very formulaic way to approach communication, where you start off by saying, I feel, and you keep it internal. It's not like, I feel shitty when you do this. It's like, I feel bad when X happens, when we get into combat. And then you explain why you feel that way, because when we get into combat, I feel like I'm not being heard, or I don't, and you explain your feeling. And then you just make a simple request. You say, so the next time we get into combat, could you please not do this? And it's just a really straightforward way to remove yourself from the emotions. Because sometimes when you get into this conversation, you're being very like communicative and honest, but sometimes people, because everyone has their own perception and thing going on, they may be like, oh my God, you're attacking me, and like, you think that I'm a garbage person. It's like, no, I think this, and I need you to do this. And it's just a really nice way to come together and make it like clean and easy.
Yeah.
I think Jason
Right.
said something really good earlier about, you know, I only run the monsters. You know, I'm not the monster. Dice rolls.
Well, let's be
are
honest.
what-
I am a monster, but I'm not the bad guy.
Yeah, you're not the
T-shirt
bad
that
guy.
says that.
Hence the meat grinder.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because, you know, we as DMs, you know, if we're playing an ultra intelligent monster and you're taking them up against a group of adventurers, they're going to do incredibly intelligent things that are going to be difficult for the party to overcome. But there's even like, you know, like, let's, you know, think about when a tiger attacks. We've all seen when animals attack and there's a tiger who pounces on somebody, and you know, generally speaking, it doesn't knock someone down and then jump to the next one. It tries to grab that thing and run away with it. And so that could be a person, you know. And so when we run monsters, we try to run them as they would. A lot of times that could be incredibly difficult for a party member or a player to recognize that, oh, well, he's just being a jerk, versus, well, that's what the monster would do, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of a beautiful thing. I don't know if you've used Vorpal, Matt, or not, or anyone else here, but Vorpal board allows you to do a digital roll so everybody sees it. So if you're using another platform that does that. So I do a thing where I'm the monster. I feel like I'm going to attack this person who's prone, who's unconscious. So then 2 death saves, whatever. I roll a d20. If it's an 11 or higher, I'm going to hit you. If it's lower, then I do something else. So I've put that out there that helps put the ease of them thinking that I'm a bully all the time, which I think it worked, especially with my 9-player deaths in the other show.
I make sure that all rolls on our table, because I don't do anything online, but I make sure all rolls are on the table out in front of everybody, including my own.
Yeah.
I don't hide any rolls. And I actually, our host, Luke Gygax, last time I talked to him, we were talking about TPKs, and I've heard a lot of people say, well, 5e is really hard to kill a player in. And I'm like, I've had more TPKs in 5e than I have any other edition. And the reason is because of intelligent monsters. Like, Healing Word is such a powerful spell, you know?
God.
And if I'm a hobgoblin who's trained at combat and I just knock a guy down and I know that guy 30 feet away is just going to bring this guy back up, what's that hobgoblin going to do?
Yeah.
You know? And so there are a lot of attacks and prone characters in my game because of that one spell.
Oh yeah.
And it just it's kind of like it kind of.
Oh, that's one.
Oh no.
Well, to touch on what he
Ray, you're up next.
Lay it on us, Ray. I know you had your
Ray,
hand
go
up.
ahead, Ray.
Yeah,
right.
no, I mean, I think the other part I wanted to add into this. So my campaign, it's been going on for about 26 years. It's just a story that we've continuously gone on. We've got groups of players that have been playing since day one, and they know that I actually allow certain groups to play bad characters. I mean, they can take it and run with it. And so the part that gets me in an emotional situation is that when I step in and allow the positive players or the players that are playing for the proposed good side to make actions and fight against the bad players. And what I find though is that when those bad players feel like they've been spurned or they feel like their months of work are get suddenly squashed, you're going, yeah, but I'm not going to steal that thunder away. So I'm actually, as a DM style, personally for myself, I'm actually very close to almost something like Lady Tran, where it's like, if it's not a comfortable situation for me, if the game's not fun, if people are not, let me rewind that. D&D for me is to allow people to come to my table and enjoy the experience. Now, that experience can be death, that experience can be sadness, that experience can be joy, but it's an experience.
Yep.
The only thing I ask is that you never attack the player personally. And if it gets to that point, I myself, I'm willing to put my world in a box, lock it in a hole somewhere, and go, because I'd rather have the relationship between that player than whatever I could bring to the dice. So.
And just because I definitely relate to that, so I want to speak on that too, where I think it's very powerful as a DM to be able to have the control over deciding who's at your table, what game I kind of want to run. And something important to me is kind of like the beginning speech, is I like to tell players coming to my table the DM style that I am. So I'm a rules is fun DM. So I have like a little blurb of this is how I run games. And then I also say, this is the kind of campaign I'm running, whether that's Curse of Strahd or Descent into Avernus. These are the styles. It could be scary, it could be gory. Let me know what you're comfortable with, not comfortable with, kind of that session 0 thing. But I think you don't know what your players are going to be like, unfortunately, until a couple sessions into the game. And that's where it's, as a DM, you can have that control of saying, this is a good table for me, or I'm sorry, guys, this isn't the type of game I wanted to run. Because you as a DM can give all that information up front, but the players, it's not until you start interacting with one another that you can discover that. So.
Agreed. I've actually ran into a situation right now where I had a player come up to me and say, mentally, I'm not in a good place with everything going on. And I was like, then we're done. And he goes, no, I really want to play. And I go, no, I'm sorry. I've got to tell you, when you tell me that that's an issue and you're bringing it to light, it's me as a person, but me as a friend. I'm going, this is not the crux I want to, this is not the straw I wanted to break your backs.
Yeah, I've actually had a very similar thing happen where I had some players who were going through some tough things, and they wanted to keep playing, and I was, the fact that they mentioned that to me meant that whatever we were doing in our current game might have been a little too much for them. So we actually just suspended the campaign and switched to a totally different tone and new campaign right there, because at the end of the day, I think this will be a common thread we see amongst all the topics that we're going to touch on, but communication is like the most important part of being a DM, whether it's laying out expectations at the beginning of your game or pivoting if you're in the middle of a campaign and something just totally needs to change due to the players or life or the tone or the direction it's going. And I think that's one of the questions I bet we all get the most often from people. It's like, how do you say this or do this? And it's almost always at its core a problem with a player itself, not like a game mechanic, not a twist or turn in the adventure, but actually like a player issue. And those are the hardest to navigate for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Am I alive?
You're at 1 hit point.
Can you everybody hear me?
Not great.
We can hear you, and you look like this.
Yeah, your
perfect.
frame rate is a little off.
Your beard is
So
magnificent, though. So
Your frame rate is 2.
Apparently, Tampa, Florida is out of internet right now. So thank you,
Oh,
Spectrum.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know what's going on, but apparently it's a big deal. But we'll finish this up and we'll figure that out.
Wow.
So, however you guys picked up, I don't even know what's the last thing you guys heard?
We were just talking about communicating about communication, sharing.
could like
information.
radio station segue this right into TPKs because I think that's where we're headed. In fact,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
this team.
No kidding. So I think where I was heading was along the lines of communication. It's more so, obviously, playing D&D, it's about the people around the table. And I think one thing that we can do with the session 0 is obviously discussing the mechanics, but also getting to know one another a little bit better. So Lili, you and I actually recently discussed, we had a conversation about self-awareness and how important it is to be conscious of your personal state of being. So how do you think we can share this with our players? What is a good way to facilitate this open table trust building exercise or conversation?
Yeah. So I ran a stream channel called Roll for Damage, which was a Femmes and Friends stream. And, whatever stereotypes they want to say about women, I will say as a woman, it is hard to make friends with other women. Like, I don't know if that's just me, but I've heard a lot of women say that. So communication was one of those things that we really wanted to nail down from the beginning because all of us at the table didn't know each other beforehand. We had just met because we wanted to play D&D. And so right from the get-go, we were like, hey, there are going to be times where we don't always get along. There are going to be times where some of us make decisions that aren't great for the table. There are going to be all of these things that happen. And we're running a stream and a channel, and there's all that thing as well. So like I mentioned before, like I've done a lot of work on communication and trying to be better about it. And just when I get to any table, whether it's a one-shot, whether it's a campaign or etc., I'm always straight up like, listen, I'm going to tell you straight about everything. Like, I am a very open person. If you follow me on Instagram and Twitter, you'll know I'll tell you my entire freaking life and everything, whether you like it or not. So when they come to the table, and if I see people that, I see friction starting to happen, I'll try and like unfurl that a little bit, but not in a like, yo, Bob, what's your problem? It's more of a like, Bob, I noticed that you didn't participate in the last encounter or the last roleplay encounter and you didn't have much to say. I was just wondering if there's anything that the table could do to facilitate something for you. Like, what would you have liked to gotten out of that and this and that? So really just trying to be as empathetic as possible. That's another big tool that I preach for DMs is empathy and understanding that you have a person there that has their whole entire life and perspective and memories and biases and all of these things, and really empathizing with that and understanding that it's different. But then like I always picture communication like you're building a bridge across a chasm and you both have to like start building from each side, and sometimes it's gonna fail and crash, but then you just keep building and eventually you have a bridge of communication. So just stick with it. You got to trust each other, and if you're playing with someone that you don't feel like you can trust, you might not be at the right table. You're probably not at the right table. So it's about finding the right
And I
game.
think it's always interesting because you think that as adults we all communicate the same way, whenever in reality it's the opposite. No one communicates in the same exact way. And I think meeting, if any of you guys know what an Enneagram is, meeting that person where they're meeting that person where they're at, talking to them in their love language, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that not all of your players are going to respond to feedback or be able to give you feedback the way that you necessarily want them to meet them around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think if you go up to any adult and you ask them, have you mastered the art of communication? If any of them say yes, they're lying. So
Mhm.
I think that proves it's like a lifelong skill. And even as adults, we think we know a lot, but we have to keep working on things like this. And it's a constantly evolving skill.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kelsey, however, so both you and Jason are entrepreneurs, and you've created incredible brands for yourself that people love and adore. Both of you are exceptional content writers, but I wanted to pay tribute to your incredible way of delivering value-packed emails for your respective audiences. So Kelsey, semi-recently, we actually kind of talked about it. In one of your emails campaign, you talked about minimalism and how it isn't necessarily about getting rid of more, but rather making use of less, and valuing that core set of usefulness, if I got that right.
Oh, that was so perfect.
So Kelsey and Jason, in an effort to avoid railroading players to a specific content. Oh, there we go. Am I still here? There we go. All right, technical difficulties all over the place. So in an effort to avoid railroading, in an effort to avoid railroading your players to specific content that you've spent countless hours prepping right now, how can a dungeon master incorporate this minimalistic mindset while writing or preparing for an adventure?
Jason, you should go first on that one.
You beat me to it. I was going to say you should go first. Okay. So let me make sure I understand the question. So like, how do you do great content and great adventures, but being minimalist about it and not over preparing, not going kind of crazy with the prep and driving yourself nuts?
Yeah, being able to adapt and to overcome different situations that might arise. Say you had anticipated for all of your players to go left, but instead they go right, but you had nothing prepared if they go right.
Yeah, so it's a two-prong approach in my mind, which is basically one, I try to have a vague idea of what's going on everywhere in my world, not in a granular way, but just in a general way. And so if they go left instead of right, then I kind of know what's going on over there, and I can kind of fill it up quickly. I can render that imagination location pretty quickly. But the other thing that I do is it really is like, you guys know on my Instagram, I do the game hooks, right? And so there's almost 500 of those game hooks over there now. And originally those came about because I was teaching my kids how to play D&D, and they wanted to play all the time. And I could either go broke buying all the adventures that were out there, or I could just write my own. And so every time I had an idea for something, I would just jot it down in a little text document. And then those turned into the game hooks that I've been doing now for over 2 years. And so what I do is I kind of have a lot of those kind of pre-done things ready to go. And so if they want to zig instead of zag, then I can kind of grab something like that and just pull it up and go for it. And also too, it's not that, we're limitless fonts of inspiration and ideas. Sometimes the thing that they needed to do on the right, and now that they've picked left, guess where it is? It's on the left. But not in a way that has like the illusion of choice, but sometimes it's just like, well, I had this cool idea for this volcano, but they wanted to go on the ship. And you know what? I think the island they're going to, it has a volcano in it. And I'm just going to reuse that since they're probably never going to go to the volcano now. And so I can kind of repurpose those things and still get this story beats that I think are good in a macro level, even though they're making the micro decisions that have kind of changed the shape of the campaign.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Jason, that's brilliant as far as like an approach to how you do these things, like upcycling material and
upcycling. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I feel better about that
positive
word.
Spin on it. And I mean, I don't think I could say it better myself as far as mechanical stuff goes and things. I think it's also a little bit of, it's a mentality that you have to adopt, where I think the thing that most DMs, especially maybe newer ones, are afraid of is the players doing something they hadn't planned for. That's like their number one fear. And I think if you change that mentality, you do something in writing called kill your darlings, where you let the things that were so precious to you die in a metaphorical way.
Yes.
you kind of embrace the fun of not knowing, and you have to just shift your mindset from being afraid of that to it being excited to find out what happens, and maybe let go of the thing you were clinging to so that you can upcycle it later. And once you do that, once you approach it from an I'm going to be positive and excited about this opportunity to find out what happens, it really shifts your nervousness, and it kind of helps you just wing it without feeling so self-conscious.
One thing that I absolutely adore about Matt is that Matt Pickle Dragon is that he has such a kind-spirited way at approaching this. Keith, in the conversation that we had with Pickle, I was asking him all these things that were frustrating topics, and like in my head and most Dungeon Masters' head, it's kind of like it's a stressor. And Matt's approach to everything is so laid back, and approach it with fun, and don't stress out about that. Focus about okay, how can you adapt this? How can you put this in your pocket for later? And Matt, what are some ways that you've been able to facilitate this into your games? If something's completely off the wire and you don't really know how to get the train back on the rails.
Matt, not on the call, man.
We lost him.
Also lost his
Oh,
internet.
well, sorry, Matt. By the way, for all the viewers out there, thank you so much for working with me. Internet is completely out. My phone was on 5%, but we're all good now. But Keith, whenever we were talking with Matt about that, I know obviously this is something that you've encountered as a DM too. How can you facilitate this?
I think it's the big thing is improvising a lot, and kind of off of what Kelsey said is being able to just create as you go and allow the players to drive the story, because the way I look at it is it is the player's story really, and you're just helping tell it. So if they're not going to go in your direction, that's okay, because it's their story. Let them tell the story, and they may go in a direction that gives you other ideas to build off of. So allow them that flexibility, allow them to do that, and you really can. I mean, that is going to make it a lot more fun for everybody, because they're going to enjoy it, because they really are driving the story, and they start to feel that way, and they won't feel railroaded at all.
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that your players feel like the adventure is their own. Earlier, Matt, I think you missed it. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I can see everybody. Matt,
I'm here.
All right. So I was paying homage to Kelsey was talking about how Kelsey and Jason were talking about adapting and overcoming certain situations. And I made reference to how your approach to stressful situations is so laid back and easygoing. So I guess my true question for you is, how do you take this mindset? Like, obviously that's part of who you are and as you are as a person, but as a DM, what are some things that you can do to not get so worked up and so frustrated if something doesn't go your way?
I think you need to go into any situation expecting things not to go your way, because you're going to have 5 or 6 people at the table, and they all have their own thoughts and their own goals, and and they want to do something with their character completely unexpected, and you've got to be willing to roll with it. That's why, like, when I start a new campaign, or I plan session by session, I don't have grand plans. And my last 2 campaigns, the ultimate big bad evil guy wasn't even decided on until about a third of the way into the campaign, when I knew the direction that they were going. There were a lot of guys, big bad evil guys, in the peripheries doing things and kind of working together, but which one was going to ultimately be the one, I didn't decide until I knew which one had gotten the goat of the players, so to speak, because you just don't know. I mean, and I think that's the best approach, is to just accept that you're not going to know, and it's going to be a session by session thing, and to go with it. And that's a lot of the fun of it too. That's why I love D&D more than video games, because I could play a video game over and over and over again. It's probably going to be 95% the same every time. Yeah. And but I've never once had a D&D session go like another one.
Very good point.
That's very true. And now everybody, audience included, this was all to basically, when I said pre-TPK, this is all to do everything you can do to prevent a TPK.
as far as the nuts and bolts and the relationships that you build with your players. So sometimes as a DM, I think at some point in time, all of us have felt underappreciated in some way, shape, or form. So, and I think the reason being is that because it's such an investment of time and sometimes money, sometimes both. Anyone who's ever DM'd knows that it takes a whole bunch of time to prepare, even for just a one shot. So we all understand, and especially if you're investing money into other tabletop resources, it is nice to be appreciated and recognized for that work. Ray and Solo, I know both of you guys all prepare and you share with your communities these insane tabletop builds. They're incredibly elaborate. Ray, you are an incredible crafter. You've some insane pieces of terrain, and I know you've talked about in the past how you combat insomnia with productivity. Rather than tossing and tumbling and turning all night, you get up and you create these beautiful works of art. So Ray and Chris, have you ever been disappointed when you spend a lot of time and or money on a build and you don't necessarily get that electrified reaction from your players?
You want to go take this one first, Chris, or me?
Damn. It's funny. It kind of goes inside with what you all were just talking about with the prep. But again, like I'm a noob in this DM world. I mean, apparently I should have been doing this my entire life, but I took a really long break from D&D. I used to hyper prepare. I'd have an outline. I used to be a game designer. Let's put it in that perspective. I'd have an outline. If they do this, they go here. They do this, they go here. I literally railroaded the shit out of them in the first few sessions, quickly learning that I just need to rely on my improv and everything else. So the same thing happened with the encounter. So like it's different now because we started the stream all on the same table. So I would build like 2 or 3 small sets, and it would kind of be like, okay, so if they have these 3 options, if they pick one of those, cool, we do that. And then taking a lot of playing with Jason a lot and doing the theater of the mind stuff, especially now because I have such a big table. We tested it out with the Create Your Own Adventure today and yesterday, where I was building it on the fly. So while they're creating their characters, I'm building the sets. But I've come so far where like my sets are so modular now, where I lay down a green cloth as my grass and I throw out all my trees, and I use my +1 crafting little hills, and we throw everything out there, and I build this cool, fun interaction real time. But there's been so many times where I've built these really awesome sets, and if my players don't go that direction now, I'm a much better actor now, where I hide that disappointment. Was that Kylo Ren just walking behind you?
Yeah,
okay.
It was. I wasn't
Twice.
expecting it either.
That's
so.
amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's Adam.
Kelsey, blink twice if you're okay.
I don't know. Let me.
So, sorry. So my feelings used to get really hurt because I spent all this time. I spent like a day building these cool sets and custom making like these different foam mountains and all this stuff, and they don't go that direction. Ooh, it hurts, right? Instead of doing that, we do a theater of the mind encounter. So they go something else. I reward them. We have this really cool thing. The pacing of theater of the mind goes way faster than minis anyway. And then eventually I'll just repurpose that set somewhere else. Like maybe I'll leave it there and maybe they'll circle back the next time. I don't have that luxury. Like I have to, if like my Wednesday show doesn't do this really cool encounter, when Monday comes around, Monday is forced to do a theater of the mind because I didn't want to break it down. Yeah.
I want to interrupt you.
Sorry.
I'm talking about you unveiled this massive, beautiful thing that you made for your players. You spent hours and hours doing it, and your players are just kind of numb to it.
Got it. Kind of along the same lines where I felt like there was a lot of love and stuff put into it, and especially with like my players have seen some really cool things I do, and then sometimes I'm kind of lazy, but I still spend a lot of time on it, so I still want that same reaction. It does hurt. I think I do a pretty good job of hiding it, if it's not quite. But I think I'm harder on myself than any of my players will ever be. As far as like I know that I could have done better, or if I had more time, or whatever. But yeah.
I have a question for you, for both of you guys. What hurts more, when they don't go to the area that you have this big elaborate set for, or when they don't hook into a story that you're really interested into.
Bingo. That's
Yeah.
the second one for me.
Yeah,
The second
story.
one for me.
It's always story. It's always story.
Yeah. Just to tag on to that, one of the things that I've learned really from doing all this as far as crafting and putting things together, because I've had moments where I've spent, 14, 15, 17 hours building this thing just to release the blanket and get this wah, 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 And, I didn't take it personally. What it did for me was I started looking at it, and I look at a lot of verbal cues and visual cues with my players. So instead, I see my terrain as the visual food. You know what I mean? It's them to look at it and go, wow, that's exciting. But if I don't get that, then I'm going to start attacking on the auditory side. So I'll start playing more sounds. I'll start playing more, you know what I mean? Or better yet, if I see them not even engaging at that point, because I think that's the other part about this is, how do I as a DM engage those players? So when I get the sad trombone song, maybe it is I bring out the elixirs or something more on a field hands-on basis. So I think that's what I've done personally was I put a little onus on the stuff that I'm building, but then I'm always having stuff in the background like, is it kinetic puzzles? Is it auditory cues? Is it verbal or written documents? Some players just don't gravitate to feeling things or motioning things. So it's, hey, person that likes to read a lot, or hey, person that likes to get into the history of things. Here's a book I wrote. There you go. Things like that.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we have us as, fans of different Twitch streamers, Critical, what have you. We see like what could be, and we see their insane reaction. How they get so excited every time they drop down a map. And the fact of the reality is that you're not going to have that every time. Sometimes you're going to see something, and your players might become desensitized to it. And I'm a victim of this. Like I do these big builds, and I craft things from my players, and sometimes it's like I get the trombone letdown, and I've just learned to not take it so seriously and realize that if we enjoyed the session, if we had fun with it, and someone gets some sort of enjoyment from it, that's all that matters.
Well, and the other thing that you can bring into this is that, I just want to kind of tag on to what Chris was saying. You don't have to have everything visual. That theater of the mind, because I actually run off of a principle 80-20. I'll build what I think they're going to spend 80% of their time on. If it's not even 80% of the time, everything's theater of the mind. I mean, I am not even going to waste my time on it. Because that's the whole point, right? Where I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I'm like, I'm going to railroad you because you're going to spend some time in Troll Skull Manor. I spent 15 hours building this. So it just at that point, I'm preparing myself mentally to allow me to accept the fact that maybe they don't see the excitement into it.
Yeah.
It's not my job to get them excited. My job is to engage them.
So I got a curious question. This is for anybody. In that moment, that want when you're like, here's a cool set, and they're all like, oh, that's cool. Do you ever reboot? Like I usually stage whatever the encounter, like the minis for whatever they're gonna encounter here. Do you ever reboot at that moment when you get the want? I'm like, oh yeah, want, and I reach for the high end. Do you ever grab anything else to try to excite them through the mini?
So I don't want to. I'll leave the floor off this, and I'll let somebody else take it. So I just was in that situation where I revealed my map, and I had 12 of our players at the table just look at me like, "What is this?" So I'm starting to narrate, and I'm starting to do that. And the only thing I had in the back of my pocket was a dragon sound that was probably about 100 decibels, and I'm just going,
nice.
I'm like, that ought to get your attention. So
just push that button until it breaks.
I feel like you have to detox your play. Like a caffeine detox where you're like, no caffeine wakes me up anymore. It's kind of, I sometimes feel like amazing maps and amazing terrain can almost become that for the players. Like they sort of take it for granted. So
the bar is too high, then
Right, and I've actually done this subtly to my players where I'll scale back the complexity and fancy. We mostly play online, especially right now, and I try to scale it back a little bit so that when I actually bring forward a really important big set piece battle, that it has a little bit more impact. Because you'll notice, oh, hello, my fiance. You'll notice that everyone says hi. That your players will have a little bit. They'll perk up a little bit more. I think when it's more novel, when it's not as common. So.
Yeah. It's actually a really good point, Kels. Keeping instead of being 7, 7, 7, 10. Here's a big encounter. that's not really a big jump. Whereas you kind of like dial it down, maybe bring it down to like a 2 or a 3, like they're not really doing anything too exciting. Then boom, as soon as you bring that up, it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
you can
shit.
be sneaky too. You can be subtle about it, because any comparison is greater when it's, well, larger. So
Yeah.
You know,
Jason, you're gonna say something.
what's interesting for me is that my most stressful time as a DM is always towards the beginning of a campaign. Like we've just wrapped up like 2 or 3 years, maybe even I had one campaign that went 5 years, but we just wrapped that up and we're starting something new, and there's so much pressure because I always feel like everyone is raving about this thing that just wrapped up, and you've got all this pressure on you to recreate something that can capture it, but in a completely new way.
Yeah.
And for me, that's always like the biggest pressure is with the story as opposed to the builds or whatever. Of course, I don't do a lot of crazy builds, but Kelsey saw one though. We did the Orcus thing.
Hey,
the
GaryCon.
Temple Orcus. Yeah, we did
Years
the
back.
Temple Orcus at GaryCon. So
it was wild.
that was good times.
Yeah.
What I've learned.
Jason, what were you gonna add in there, Jason?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think we're circling around, and I think Ray even kind of alluded to it, is that we much rather have them like geek out over the story than the location. Now, at a certain level, all of those are linked. The location is only impressive, or is mostly impressive, because of the story that's going to take place there. But certainly there's a lot of things visually that add to that. Like, so I don't own like any terrain. I don't craft. That's not my thing. And so most of the time I'm using little like cardboard, things, to do stuff from Dungeon Craft, or just my dry erase mat and my markers, right? And mostly because I play out of the house a lot, and so I don't want to bring everything with me, or I'm having to do theater of the mind. Like what happened to me recently is I had this really great kind of final confrontation thing going on, and I had drawn this big circle that was like a bottomless pit and a chasm across it with a thing in the middle that was shooting out like rays of random magic. And later my friends told me, my party told me, like, that was a great map. And it took me 30 seconds to draw with dry erase, and I was just like, yeah, check me out, but it was more like the idea that was there. And so I think perhaps that is the kind of the secret rule zero for anyone making maps, whether it's just drawing them out, digital, or crafting them like Ray does, or Solo does, is just that, is it interesting? Is it going to facilitate the story? And is it going to bring joy to the table? And so, so that's just kind of my 2 cents.
I would rather bring fear to the table, but
no, their fear is your joy, Matt.
That's right.
That's why you're the pickled dragon and not the pickled halfling.
The pickled flump.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
So, guys, it has been absolutely great talking to all of you. I really appreciate you all being on here. I thank you for working with me. My technical difficult. It's always I don't know why the hell it is, but such is the case. I think we might do a little Q&A after this. I know Jason's got some stuff to prep and to wrap up. But if you're going to be around, Jason, I'd love to have you. But guys, I wanted to finish on this note. I think the biggest thing, and this is stealing one out of Matthew Mercer's book. I heard him say this in an interview one time. It's about abandoning an expectation, because if you have expectations of your players, of your DM, and they don't meet that or exceed that, then there's going to be some level of letdown or disappointment. And I think if you just leave that at the door and just walk into it like, I'm going to have fun and we're going to play some Dungeons and Dragons and roll some dice, you're going to have a successful game and you're going to avoid a TPK.
Yep.
On that note, Chris, if you want to close this out, get us to the Q&A. If anybody has any closing notes, feel free to shout them out.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we'll stick around. Anybody who wants to stick around for another 10 or 15 minutes, we'll do a Q&A. Jason does have to jet here soon because we have his Meat Grinder D&D show that starts in... That starts in a half hour? Yeah, it starts in about a half an hour.
Yeah, a little more. So like I've got like 6 minutes that I can hang out and do some Q&A.
We'll be back online here in a second too, but we'll take some questions real quick for 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll go offline for a little bit, and we'll come back at 3 o'clock Pacific time, 6 o'clock Eastern to do his meat grinder, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, I'll keep an eye on the questions in the chat, but if anybody else has any other questions with each other, go for it.
Yeah, so I'll let you read those off, and we'll just answer them accordingly.
Sure.
Guys, it's been absolutely phenomenal talking to you all.
Thanks for bringing us together.
Dungeon Scribe says, Cam, how is your fade still fresh with isolation?
Lily just asked me.
Okay, here's another question. Electromax said, how do you deal with a party that just wants big dollar items and not happy with a +2 sword? That's a good question.
Do they know how much a +2 sword costs?
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
they don't.
Go ahead.
They don't.
Go ahead, Lily.
Sell the shit out of that +2 sword. Like, what do you mean you're not happy about it? I would give them this roleplay encounter with a merchant that's like ridiculous, who like, oh, you don't know how much a +2 sword is worth? Well, I'll give you 500 gold pieces for it, and then like really try and convince that player that that's a great deal. I would make a used car salesman all day long. Because again, it's about facilitating for your players. If your players don't want that +2 sword, I'll take that +2 sword, and that merchant will go around and kill them with it in 2 rounds of combat. You know what I mean? Like, give them what they want, yo, but make it fun for yourself.
Or all of their big dollar items, they all become cursed, and then that becomes the plot of the story. It's all these cursed sentient items that they have to deal with.
Yes.
I would go ahead and give it to them. Like if they want better items, I would up the magic items because again, they want to be heroes. They want to be fantastic out there, but I would up the challenge rating of every encounter they have and just make it that much more difficult. And they need to put those things to good use.
On the flip side of that question, if you give your party too many awesome items, then you really have, like, I have dragons that have 2,000 hit points because I have players that do 100 points of damage in 1 turn. I'm like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. But yes.
You know what I've noticed is that I have my current game right now going on. It's all about collecting these special magic items, and as they're progressing, that's like the whole through line. They're getting these really great magic items, and I'm like, oh, I'm tipping this in their favor a lot. And then I realized I had done something pretty great by accident, and they almost never found money, and so they were broke as a joke. I think I froze. So am I there? Okay. So they were broke as a joke, but like had these amazing items. And so they were just like, yeah, I've got this amazing, like, bottle of the whirlwind here, but we have like 50 gold pieces for the whole party. What are we going to do? And so there's ways around it, I guess.
All right. So we have another question. How do you customize your scenarios to match players? Oh, what's that, Cam?
I was just going to say, on Jason's note, another thing you can do just from like the very beginning is don't give your players 100 gold to begin with. Like, put that perspective for them. Like, 1 gold piece is $1, is $100, and really let your players understand like 50 gold pieces is a lot of gold, and I think that like perspective always helps.
That's a really good idea, Keith. I'm gonna need that 15,000 gold piece back.
It's only 14,000.
Taxes.
Actually.
Next question. How much do you customize your scenarios to match the player's personality?
I would like to jump in on this because the thing that I've noticed from this stream is that all of you seem to plan a lot of what you do. I plan almost nothing of what I do. So almost everything that I do, whether it's a one-shot or a campaign I'll have overarching notes, but almost everything I do, I want it to be player driven. So when I am asking them for things, I'm asking real personal questions like, how does your character feel about, this servant that's in this room overhearing your conversation? How does your character do this or that? And I'm always checking in with them to see how their character sees the world, whether it's how they see a combat or this and that. And so I try then to, if their backstory is like, I lost my brother, I'll be like, oh, I got a brother right here. Here you go. And then I'll just throw it at them and be like, what do you think? Do you like them? I don't know. So listening to your players and having that level of empathy will go a long way for that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And as things for when you customize things for the players, what you can do is you get to, I don't want to say blackmail them emotionally, but
No,
blackmail
that's fair.
them emotionally.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the nicer way of saying that is to weave in their backstory into the narrative. But that's how you hook that personal investment as well. Like all of my current players, they wrote me these great backstories. One guy even wrote it in first person, and I was just like, you start the game with inspiration. Congratulations.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like I had this kind of big arc idea, and then I'm starting to slot in backstory themes into this. You know, it's not even that I changed the course of the story for them, but one person failed to, they have that folk hero background, but it's like twisted because they failed to save the village, even though they beat the thing. And they ended up being the hero of this other town that was being attacked by giants. And I was halfway through that battle before I was like, oh, they would be very emotionally invested in this. And they ended up soloing a hill giant at like 3rd level or something. And none of the people of the town saw the other part of the party. They just saw her. And now she's the hero of the Battle of the Bridge. And now the rest of the party's like, we were there too. Yeah. Her and her amazing friends, it's like, and now and you see the wheels turning now where she's like, am I worthy to be an adventurer? I don't know. Like I failed, but I succeeded. How does this great conflict? So yeah.
That's called a mind-numbing thing.
One little thing that I've done for myself is I have a post-it note taped to the back of my DM screen that I can see at all times. And I have listed out each of my players' backgrounds because I try to have their backgrounds be similar to the actual backstory. So like Olga, she is a sailor. You got Zephyr, who is a soldier. So I just write those small things down. And just from time to time, like if there's a situation and I see that, it's just a cue and inspire some sort of small event or conversation that can grow in there.
So many good questions. In your experience, do the players that come up with elaborate backstories for their character actually remember those details over the course of the campaign?
Depends on the person.
I, as a DM, like to remind
Hey guys,
them.
I gotta go.
Yep, see you, man.
Bye,
All right, see you, Jason.
Yeah, I, as a DM, like to remind them. Like when we started Realms of Ukador, everybody give me their backstories. They were all like super short, but then I went back and I'm like, hey, I'd like to know your parents' names, your siblings' names, if they alive or dead, if they died, how they died, whatever. And a lot of them were really tragic, and if GW is in here, he's going to yell at me. But he gave me this thing, I'm a druid, my family's all alive, my elven family is rich and powerful, and my human family is rich and powerful, and I wandered the land for 10 years. I'm like, oh, I got you. So one of the major arcs that I picked in the actual Realms of Ukador story, if you haven't seen it, sorry, spoilers, but was I killed his elven sister in the game as a major arc in the first arc, which started his character motivation. So we did that real time, and he hated me for a while when he did it, but when we go back, as he is talking, when we go back into it, but his backstory though, like with all his details and like I have a hard time remembering his backstory stuff because his family names are super long and they're hard to pronounce, but I have like all my detailed notes to do that. But there were certain times with some of the other players that didn't remember their stuff, and I'd always have to like either send them a private message because we're doing it live, like a live stream. It's a lot more difficult to be like, hey, you remember that NPC that your family knows from home? Oh yeah, and then they would come back into it and get in character. But it's always fun.
From my experience, my players have all remembered their backstories, and it's almost like a little bit insulting when it's not integrated into the main storyline to them, because I take great pains to try to integrate something into the storyline. Why are they on this grand adventure? There might be a hook in there as to why there is, or maybe it's just you need some sort of side adventure. There's not enough players showing up for a particular night. So yeah, that guy with the scar that murdered your family, he shows up for a night, or but my players traditionally have always been like, so do I notice anything distinguishing about this particular NPC? Is it somebody from my backstory, or but that's, I guess every table's going to be a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah, like building off what Matt said with that, I will sometimes get players who write somewhat long backstories. It kind of depends on the individual, but I don't always get super actionable like story hooks from those backgrounds. Not always. So in every case, I ask players if they want to write something long or short to give me a secret, a goal, and a fear. Which all three are actionable hooks at that point. So and that kind of helps me as the DM because I kind of suffer from info overload, which is why I'm a bit of a minimalist DM, but I would have a really hard time delving into each extremely extended backstory if I didn't do that. If I didn't do like those, give me the three things. So,
Yeah.
I always loved it when the backstories were extremely vague, because then it's just, oh, I have so much room to play.
Yeah.
Gonna ruin your backstory.
There's so many good questions. Do you guys like to Frankenstein together monster abilities and legendary actions to give the monster a more custom feel? Yeah, I don't use anything from any book ever.
Yeah.
Because I've played with people who have memorized the monster manual.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, this troll... real quick story, sorry. I know I talk a lot. But my players were fighting a Hydra in the bottom of a dungeon. We had to do it because someone was doing a Kickstarter and we were trying to promote their swamp set. So I built a swamp in the bottom of a dungeon. So they were fighting a Hydra, and he literally does this on stream, on live stream. Does this, looks at his phone, smiles, and puts his phone down. There are any fire sconces around here? And I was like, there are. He does it. He shoots the Hydra with fire, and it didn't do what he thought it was going to do because this was an acid Hydra. But I created that real time, be like, come on. Like, that's blatant. But other times, I usually don't because I like, everything's custom. That's just me. It's easier for me to remember, too. But I'll stop.
So I did the Avatar Lost Airbender thing, and I will genetically like mix animals together where it's like, here's a manticore and a chimera, you know what I mean, or a goblin and an ogre, things like that. And you know, it's a running joke with my players. They're like, what is the magical like creature coming out to this day? But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's you get players that memorize that, and it's hard to kind of have the hook. And try to make these creatures, because I also believe that you have to make these encounters, you know, somewhat memorable. And if they're always going up against, you know, Johnny Random Green Dragon, they kind of expect there's no mystery. So I don't know.
You know, I like to play with monsters quite a bit. Like to me, it's absolutely absurd that a giant, even though the book doesn't explicitly say it, it's absurd that the rules would prohibit a giant from picking up a player and not, you know, throwing a Hail Mary pass as far as you could throw them. I had a game once where I had they picked up the dwarf, and I go, instead of a boulder, he's gonna whip the dwarf at the elf cleric, and I rolled an nat 20. I created the elf dwarf, you know, and that was extremely memorable. You know, it was just, but at the same time, players were like, can they pick up players? I'm like, sure they can. They're giants.
Why not? I'm writing that one down though. I've never done that. Sorry, Cameron. Sorry, Keith.
Hey, I have to dip out, so I just wanted to say bye real quick. I didn't want to just leave the call, but it's been wonderful talking to you all, and hopefully we can do it again soon. Bye, everyone.
Tell Adam.